First contact and misunderstanding. Commander Vextar adjusted his ceremonial scales as he stood on the bridge of the Saurian dreadnought Stellar Dominion. His yellow eyes scanned the tactical displays showing the positions of his 12 warships as they approached the human mining sector. The distress signals had been coming for 3 days now, growing weaker with each transmission. Pirates, most likely, or perhaps equipment failures at the remote mining stations. The Saurian fleet represented the pinnacle of galactic military technology. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, with hulls crafted from molecularly perfect alloys and weapon systems that could slice through asteroids with focused energy beams. Vextar's own flagship carried enough firepower to sterilize a small moon, and his crew of elite Saurian warriors had trained for decades in the most advanced military academies in known space. As they dropped out of hyperspace near the mining colony designated Nexus 7, Vextar felt his confidence waver slightly. The human settlement looked exactly as primitive as he had expected. Rough-hewn asteroids had been hollowed out and connected with metal tubes. Simple fusion reactors provided power, and basic life support systems kept the human miners alive in the harsh vacuum of space. It was functional, certainly, but it lacked the elegant efficiency that marked truly advanced civilizations. "Commander," announced his tactical officer, Lieutenant Kessara, her forked tongue flicking nervously. "We're detecting massive energy readings approaching from the outer system. Unknown configuration, but the signatures are unlike anything in our databases." Vextar studied the sensor readings with growing concern. The approaching entities registered as pure energy, with no solid matter or conventional propulsion systems. They moved through space like living lightning, leaving trails of distorted reality in their wake. Whatever these creatures were, they represented a completely unknown threat to galactic security. "All ships, battle formation Epsilon," Vexitar commanded through the fleet communication network. "Unknown hostiles approaching. Prepare primary energy batteries for engagement." The Saurian warships moved into their assigned positions with mechanical precision. Each vessel knew its role in the complex dance of advanced military tactics. Energy shields flickered to life around the fleet, creating overlapping fields of protection that could deflect almost any known weapon. Targeting computers locked onto the approaching energy beings and calculated optimal firing solutions. The enemy arrived like a storm of living electricity. Dozens of writhing energy forms swept through the mining colony, passing through solid matter as if it didn't exist. Where they touched the human structures, metal began to dissolve and electronics failed in showers of sparks. The creatures were feeding on the energy systems that kept the miners alive, draining power from reactors and life support units. "Open fire!" Vextar ordered, and his fleet unleashed a concentrated barrage of energy weapons that lit up the darkness between the stars. The results were immediately disappointing. The coherent energy beams passed harmlessly through the attacking creatures without causing any visible damage. The beings seemed to absorb the weapon energy and actually grow larger and more aggressive. Within moments, Vexitar realized that his most advanced military technology was not just useless but was actually feeding the enemy. "Cease fire! All ships, cease fire immediately," he commanded, but the damage was already done. The energy beings had grown to twice their original size and were now swarming toward his fleet with obvious hunger. That was when the human ships arrived. Vexitar watched in amazement as a motley collection of industrial vessels dropped out of hyperspace and began moving toward the battle. These were not warships in any traditional sense, but rather converted mining platforms and cargo haulers. Their hulls were scarred from years of asteroid work, and their weapon systems consisted of modified mining equipment rather than proper military hardware. The lead vessel sent a communication request, and Vextar accepted it with growing curiosity. The human who appeared on his screen was a middle-aged woman with short gray hair and intelligent brown eyes. She wore a simple work uniform covered in grease stains and carried herself with the confident bearing of someone who had spent decades solving practical problems. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the mining vessel Rough Diamond," she said in the direct manner typical of her species. "We received your distress beacon and came as fast as we could. What's the situation?" Vextar studied the human captain with his compound eyes, noting the calm competence in her voice despite the obvious danger. "Captain Chen, I am Commander Vextar of the Saurian Defense Force. We are dealing with unknown energy-based entities that are immune to our weapon systems. I recommend you withdraw to a safe distance while we develop alternative tactics." Chen glanced at something off-screen and nodded slowly. "Commander, those look like void hunters. We've dealt with their kind before in the deep mining sectors. They feed on energy, but they have trouble with solid matter moving at high velocity." Before Vextar could respond, the human fleet was already moving into attack formation. Their ships spread out in what looked like a completely random pattern, with each vessel taking an independent approach vector. There was none of the precise coordination that marked advanced military doctrine, just a collection of industrial workers heading toward mortal danger with casual determination. The first human ship to engage was a converted asteroid hauler called the Heavy Lifter. Instead of energy weapons, it fired streams of solid projectiles from modified mining cannons. The metal slugs passed through the nearest energy being and struck the asteroid surface behind it, causing massive explosions that sent debris flying in all directions. At first, Vextar thought the humans had missed their targets entirely, but then he noticed something remarkable happening. The energy creatures were avoiding the areas where solid matter was moving at high speed. The kinetic impacts weren't damaging them directly, but the physical disruption was somehow interfering with their energy fields. All mining ships, switch to solid shot and debris charges. Captain Chen's voice crackled over the human communication channel. These things don't like it when we throw rocks at them. What followed was unlike any battle Vextar had ever witnessed in his long military career. The human miners began using their industrial equipment as weapons in ways that defied conventional tactical thinking. Plasma cutting torches designed for asteroid processing became short-range flame weapons. Drilling rigs were converted into kinetic projectile launchers. Explosive charges meant for mining operations were detonated to create clouds of high-velocity debris. The energy beings found themselves caught in a storm of solid matter moving at incredible speeds. Where the Saurian energy weapons had fed them and made them stronger, the human kinetic attacks disrupted their cohesion and forced them to retreat. The creatures tried to adapt to this new threat, but there was no way to evolve defenses against simple physics. Captain Chen's ship demonstrated tactics that no military academy in the galaxy taught. When her primary mining cannons ran out of ammunition, she ordered her crew to load them with spare parts and equipment. The rough diamond fired everything from broken drill bits to empty fuel containers, turning industrial waste into effective ammunition. "Commander Vextar," Chen's voice came over the communication channel. "We could use some support here. Your ships might not be able to hurt these things directly, but you could help us herd them into kill zones." The Saurian commander felt his worldview shifting as he watched these primitive human miners outperform his advanced military fleet. Their ships were crude and their weapons were improvised, but they understood something about combat that his sophisticated training had never taught him. Sometimes the simplest solution was the most effective one. "All Saurian vessels," Vextar commanded, "use tractor beams to move debris into the paths of enemy entities. Coordinate with human mining ships to create overlapping fields of kinetic interference." The combined human and Saurian forces began working together in ways that neither species had anticipated. The advanced alien technology provided precision and coordination, while the human industrial equipment delivered raw, destructive power. Energy beings that had seemed invincible just minutes before were now being systematically destroyed by flying chunks of metal and explosive debris. But what truly amazed Vextar was the attitude of the human crews. They approached this life-and-death battle with the same practical competence they brought to their mining operations. There was no panic or heroic posturing, just workers solving a problem with the tools they had available. As the last of the energy beings retreated toward deep space, Vextar found himself staring at the human fleet with new respect and growing unease. These beings had just defeated an enemy that his advanced military technology couldn't even touch, and they had done it using equipment designed for industrial labor. The implications were staggering. If humans could turn mining equipment into effective weapons so easily, what could they do with actual military hardware? And more disturbing still, they had approached the entire battle as if it were just another day's work rather than a desperate fight for survival. Commander Vextar realized that he had just witnessed something that would change his understanding of warfare forever. These humans weren't just clever or resourceful, they were apex problem solvers who could turn any situation to their advantage through sheer determination and practical thinking. As his fleet began rescue operations for the surviving miners, Vextar found himself wondering what other surprises humanity might have in store for the galaxy. The energy beings had been just the beginning, and somehow he suspected that the real lessons were yet to come. The battle unfolds. Human ingenuity revealed. The celebration was short-lived. Commander Vextar had barely begun to process the implications of human combat effectiveness when his sensor operator announced new contacts approaching from multiple vectors. These energy signatures were larger and more aggressive than the first wave, and they were moving with obvious intelligence and coordination. "Commander," Lieutenant Kesara reported with barely controlled panic in her voice, "we're detecting at least 50 more entities incoming. These readings suggest they're significantly more powerful than the initial group." Vextar studied the tactical display and felt his scaled skin flush with stress hormones. The approaching Void Hunters had learned from the fate of their advanced scouts and were now arriving in formation. They moved like a coordinated swarm, using the vacuum of space itself as a medium for communication and tactical coordination. Captain Chen's voice crackled over the communication channel with the same calm professionalism she had shown during the first engagement. "Commander Vextar, we're reading the same signatures. These bigger ones are going to be a lot tougher than the scouts we just dealt with." "Captain Chen, I recommend immediate withdrawal," Vextar replied, his tactical training asserting itself. "Your ship sustained significant damage in the previous engagement, and these new entities appear to be much more dangerous." There was a brief pause before Chen responded, and Vextar could hear other human voices in the background discussing something in rapid, technical language. When she came back on the line, there was something different in her tone that made the Saurian commander's scales prickle with unease. "Commander, we've got about 300 miners on that station who can't be evacuated in time. My people don't leave their own behind." Chen's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. "We're going to hold position and fight. You're welcome to help, but we understand if your ships need to withdraw." Vextar realized that he was facing a choice that would define not just his military career, but his understanding of what it meant to be a warrior. The logical decision was to retreat with his advanced fleet and preserve his sophisticated technology for battles that could actually be won. But watching these primitive human miners prepare to face impossible odds for their comrades had awakened something in his consciousness that his military training had never addressed. "All Saurian vessels, maintain position and prepare for extended engagement," he commanded, surprising himself with the decision. "We stand with our human allies." The second wave of Void Hunters arrived like a tsunami of living energy. These entities were easily 3 times the size of the scouts, and they moved with the coordination of a single organism rather than individual creatures. Where the first group had fed randomly on available energy sources, these larger beings showed tactical intelligence and focused their attacks on the most critical systems. The human response was immediate and utterly shocking in its creativity. Instead of trying to fight the energy beings directly, the miners began converting their entire infrastructure into weapons. Captain Chen coordinated the effort with the casual competence of someone organizing a shift change rather than directing a desperate battle. "Jenkins, get your crew to rig the primary fusion reactors for overload," Chen commanded over the human communication network. "Martinez, I want those plasma torches reconfigured for maximum output. Davidson, start prepping the emergency charges we use for asteroid cracking." Vextar watched in amazement as the human mining station began transforming itself into a massive weapon platform. Plasma cutting tools designed for precision work on asteroid surfaces were jury-rigged into flame weapons capable of disrupting energy fields. Industrial fusion reactors were modified to produce controlled explosions that sent waves of superheated debris through space. The human ship, Iron Will, demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking that no military academy in the galaxy taught. When her primary weapons were damaged by energy drain attacks, Captain Rodriguez ordered his crew to open the cargo bays and begin manually throwing mining equipment at the enemy. Heavy drilling bits, spare reactor components, and even personal belongings became ammunition in the desperate fight. "This is insane," Lieutenant Kesara whispered as she watched human crew members actually climb outside their damaged ships to physically attach explosive charges to passing energy beings. But the insanity was working. The Void Hunters found themselves under constant bombardment from solid objects that disrupted their energy matrices and forced them to retreat or dissipate. Where sophisticated energy weapons had been useless, simple kinetic attacks were proving devastatingly effective. Captain Chen's ship, the Rough Diamond, took a direct hit from one of the larger entities and lost her main propulsion systems. Instead of withdrawing for repairs, Chen ordered her crew to use their maneuvering thrusters to ram the damaged vessel directly into the enemy formation. The impact sent both ship and energy being tumbling through space, but the human crew was already suiting up for EVA operations to continue the fight personally. "All hands, prepare for boarding operations," Chen announced with the same tone she might use to call for lunch break. "We're taking this fight to them directly." Vextar could not believe what he was hearing. These humans were preparing to conduct boarding operations against entities made of pure energy. It was tactically impossible, strategically unsound, and probably suicidal. It was also the most courageous thing he had ever witnessed in his long military career. The human miners began suiting up in their industrial EVA gear and arming themselves with whatever tools they could carry. Plasma torches became personal weapons, and mining charges were converted into improvised grenades. They moved through space using their suit thrusters like individual fighter craft, swarming around the larger energy beings and attacking them at point-blank range. Chief Engineer Maria Santos exemplified the human approach to impossible problems. When her plasma torch proved ineffective against a particularly large void hunter, she jury-rigged her suit's life support system to create a localized electromagnetic pulse. The resulting explosion destroyed her EVA suit and nearly killed her, but it also disrupted the energy being's cohesion long enough for other miners to finish it off with kinetic weapons. "Santos is down but alive," came the report over the human communication channel. "Her EMP trick worked. All suits, try overloading your power cells for area effect disruption." What followed was a systematic demonstration of human problem-solving under extreme pressure. The miners began deliberately overloading their equipment to create electromagnetic pulses, kinetic explosions, and energy disruptions that interfered with Void Hunter operations. They turned every piece of their industrial infrastructure into a weapon and every safety protocol into a tactical advantage. The mining ship Deep Digger was completely disabled by energy drain, but her crew refused to abandon her. Instead, they converted the entire vessel into a massive kinetic weapon by loading her cargo holds with spare equipment and setting her on a collision course with the largest concentration of enemy entities. The crew evacuated at the last moment, leaving the ship to complete its final mission under automated control. Commander Vextar found himself coordinating Saurian support operations for human tactics that defied every principle of civilized warfare. His sophisticated vessels served as mobile platforms for human EVA operations and provided precise tractor beam manipulation to enhance kinetic attacks. The elegant technology of his fleet became support equipment for the crude but effective human assault. "Commander," Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel as she personally led a group of miners in an attack on a particularly large void hunter. "We're going to need covering fire for a special operation. Can your ships create a debris field in Sector 7? Vextar coordinated his fleet to pulverize several small asteroids, creating a cloud of high-velocity fragments that disrupted energy being movement in the target area. He watched as Chen's team used the cover to approach the largest enemy entity with what appeared to be a collection of mining charges jury-rigged together into an improvised weapon of massive destructive power. The explosion that followed lit up half the solar system and sent shockwaves through both fleets. When the energy discharge faded, the largest Void Hunter was gone and Chen's team was floating unconscious in space. Immediate rescue operations recovered all the human miners alive, though several required emergency medical treatment for radiation exposure. As the battle continued, Vextar began to understand something profound about human nature. These beings didn't see themselves as heroes or warriors, but rather as workers solving a particularly difficult problem. They approached mortal combat with the same practical competence they brought to asteroid mining, treating enemy entities as obstacles to be overcome through applied engineering and determined effort. The most disturbing aspect was their casual acceptance of catastrophic damage and personal sacrifice. Human ships that would have been written off as total losses by any rational military continued fighting with improvised repairs and jury-rigged systems. Crew members volunteered for suicide missions with the same matter-of-fact attitude they might show when volunteering for overtime shifts. By the time the second wave of Void Hunters had been defeated, Vextar realized that he had witnessed something that would fundamentally change his understanding of warfare and courage. These humans had not just won an impossible battle, but they had done it while treating the entire engagement as routine industrial work rather than heroic combat. As his medical teams treated wounded human miners alongside Saurian casualties, Commander Vextar found himself questioning everything he had learned about military science and civilized warfare. These primitive beings with their crude technology had just demonstrated tactical effectiveness that his advanced civilization could never match. The implications were staggering, and Vextar suspected that the final phase of this engagement would teach him lessons that no military academy in the galaxy was prepared to provide. Victory and understanding, the true nature of human strength. Commander Vextar thought the worst was over when his sensors detected the third wave of approaching contacts. These readings were unlike anything they had faced before. A single massive entity was emerging from hyperspace, easily 10 times larger than the previous Void Hunters. Its energy signature was so intense that it was actually warping space-time around itself, creating gravitational anomalies that threatened to tear apart nearby asteroids. "Commander," Lieutenant Cassara reported with barely controlled terror in her voice, "that thing is the size of a small moon. Our weapons won't even scratch it, and it's heading directly for the mining station." Vextar stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The entity approaching them wasn't just another Void Hunter. It was something ancient and powerful that had been drawn by the energy discharges from the previous battles. This was a predator that fed on the life force of entire solar systems, and they had accidentally summoned it to their location. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel with the same calm professionalism that had carried them through the previous engagements, but Vextar could hear the undertone of grim determination that suggested she understood the hopelessness of their situation. "All human vessels, this is Chen. That big one is what we call a system eater. It's drawn by large energy discharges and won't stop until it's drained every power source in the area. Standard evacuation protocols are not going to work because this thing moves faster than our ships." Vextar felt his stress hormones surge as he realized the implications. The system eater could drain the energy from his fleet's reactors faster than they could escape to hyperspace. Even if they managed to withdraw, the creature would consume the 300 human miners still trapped on the station, then move on to populated systems throughout the sector. "Captain Chen, perhaps if we coordinate our remaining ships, we could create enough of a distraction to allow civilian evacuation," Vextar suggested, though he knew the plan was hopeless even as he spoke. There was a long pause before Chen responded, and when her voice came back over the channel, it carried a tone that made Vextar's scales flush with something he couldn't identify. It wasn't fear or desperation, but rather the kind of focused determination that came from someone who had just made a decision that terrified and inspired them in equal measure. "Commander, we appreciate the offer, but my people have a different plan. We're going to convert the entire mining station into a weapon and take that thing down." The audacity of the proposal left Vextar speechless. The mining station was essentially a collection of hollowed-out asteroids connected by metal tubes. Converting it into a weapon capable of threatening something the size of a small moon was beyond ambitious. It was pure madness. "Captain, that's impossible," he managed to say. "Your station doesn't have the power output or structural integrity to damage something that large." "Commander," Chen replied with what sounded suspiciously like amusement, "you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." What followed was the most incredible display of human engineering improvisation that Vextar had ever witnessed. The miners began systematically converting their entire infrastructure into a single massive weapon system. Fusion reactors were linked together in parallel configuration to create power outputs that exceeded the design specifications by orders of magnitude. Mining charges were connected in series to create explosive devices that could crack small moons. Chief Engineer Rodriguez coordinated the technical aspects with the casual competence of someone who had spent decades solving impossible problems with insufficient resources. "Jenkins, reroute all power conduits through the primary asteroid. Martinez, I want every plasma cutter we have linked to the central power grid. Davidson, start moving all our remaining mining charges to the forward sections." The human miners worked with the efficiency of a machine and the creativity of artists. They jury-rigged safety systems to operate far beyond their intended limits. They connected incompatible technologies using improvised interfaces that should have been impossible. They turned a simple mining station into something that resembled a weapon designed by a civilization centuries more advanced than their own. Captain Chen explained their plan with the matter-of-fact tone of someone describing routine maintenance procedures. "We're going to overload every system simultaneously and channel all the energy through a focused plasma beam. The mining charges will provide additional kinetic impact, and the station's structure will serve as a delivery system." Vextar realized what they were proposing to do. They intended to turn the mining station into a single-use weapon that would destroy itself in the process of firing. It was tactically brilliant, strategically sound, and completely insane. "Captain, that plan will destroy the station and everyone aboard it," he pointed out with growing horror. "Commander," Chen replied with infinite patience, "that's why it's going to work. That system eater expects us to try to preserve ourselves. It's not going to be prepared for someone willing to trade their lives for the kill shot." The conversation that followed revealed something about human nature that Vextar had never encountered in any other species. The 300 miners aboard the station were given a clear explanation of the plan and an opportunity to evacuate to the Saurian ships. Every single one of them chose to remain and help operate the improvised weapon system. They didn't make this choice because they were heroes or because they had some noble cause to die for. They made it because they were workers who had been given a job to do, and they intended to do it properly, regardless of the personal cost. The casual acceptance of mortality that Vextar witnessed was unlike anything in his experience. "All right, people," Chen announced over the station communication system. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." The system eater approached the mining station like a living mountain of energy and hunger. Its presence warped reality itself, creating gravitational anomalies that pulled in debris from across the solar system. Vextar could see smaller energy beings swarming around it like parasites, feeding on the overflow from its massive consumption of ambient energy. The human miners waited until the creature was at point-blank range before activating their improvised weapon. Every fusion reactor on the station overloaded simultaneously, creating a power surge that should have been impossible with their primitive technology. The plasma cutters linked together produced a coherent beam that punched through space like a lance of concentrated stellar fire. The mining charges detonated in sequence, creating a kinetic shockwave that traveled at significant fractions of light speed. The entire mining station came apart in a controlled explosion that channeled all of its destructive energy into a single focused attack on the system eater's core. The results were spectacular in their violence. The ancient entity writhed in what could only be described as agony as the human attack disrupted its energy matrix and caused massive internal damage. For the first time in perhaps millions of years, something had hurt it badly enough to threaten its existence. But the system eater wasn't dead yet. It began draining energy directly from space itself, trying to heal the damage and prepare for retaliation. That was when the human miners demonstrated their final tactical innovation. Instead of trying to escape the dying station, they had rigged the entire structure to continue its attack even after the initial explosion. Secondary charges detonated in sequence, sending streams of debris and equipment toward the wounded entity. Every piece of mining machinery became a kinetic projectile, and every structural component became part of the attack. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel one final time, transmitted from the station's emergency beacon as the structure tore itself apart around her. "Commander Vextar, it has been an honor working with you. Tell your people that humanity stands ready to solve whatever problems the galaxy throws at us." The mining station completed its self-destruction in a blaze of plasma and kinetic energy that lit up half the solar system. When the explosion faded, both the station and the system eater were gone, leaving only expanding clouds of debris to mark where the battle had taken place. Commander Vextar sat in his command chair and tried to process what he had just witnessed. These humans had not just defeated an enemy that could have threatened entire solar systems, but they had done it with improvised technology and a casual acceptance of sacrifice that defied everything he understood about rational behavior. In the days that followed, as his fleet helped search for survivors and coordinate relief efforts, Vextar interviewed the human miners who had evacuated before the final battle. What he learned changed his understanding of humanity forever. They didn't see themselves as heroes or warriors. They were workers who had been faced with a problem that needed solving, and they had applied their skills and resources to find a solution. The fact that the solution required their lives was regrettable, but not particularly remarkable from their perspective. "Commander," explained Miner First Class Patricia Williams as she recovered in the Saurian medical bay, "that's just how we do things. When there's a job that needs doing, we do it. If it's dangerous work, well, dangerous work pays better." The casual attitude toward mortality and sacrifice that Williams displayed was typical of every human Vextar interviewed. They approached death the same way they approached equipment failure or resource shortages, as problems to be solved through applied intelligence and determined effort. Chief Engineer Martinez, one of the few senior staff to survive the station's destruction, explained their philosophy during a conversation that haunted Vextar for years afterward. "You advanced species spend so much time thinking about problems that you forget to solve them," Martinez said while reviewing the technical specifications of Saurian technology. "This stuff is beautiful, don't get me wrong, but it's too complex. When something breaks, you need a team of specialists and weeks of analysis. When our stuff breaks, we fix it with whatever's handy and get back to work. The final revelation came when Vextar submitted his report to Saurian High Command. The response from his superiors was immediate and alarming. They wanted to know if humanity represented a potential threat to galactic stability and whether their military effectiveness posed a danger to other species. As Vextar considered his response, he realized that he had learned something profound about the nature of strength and courage. These humans were not naturally violent or aggressive, but they were natural problem solvers who refused to be stopped by conventional limitations. They didn't seek out conflict, but when faced with threats to their people or their work, they responded with a level of determination that bordered on the supernatural. His final report to High Command was simple and direct. Humanity represents the most effective military force this galaxy has ever seen, not because they are warriors, but because they are workers who refuse to accept failure as an option. They do not seek conquest or glory, but they will sacrifice everything to protect their people and complete their missions. Any species that threatens human communities should expect to face opponents who treat impossible odds as routine challenges to be overcome through applied intelligence and unlimited determination. Commander Vextar concluded his report with a personal note that would become required reading at Saurian military academies for generations to come. I have learned that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to do what must be done regardless of the cost. Humanity has mastered this principle to a degree that makes them the most dangerous allies and the most terrifying enemies in known space. We are fortunate that they prefer building to destroying, but we should never forget that they are equally skilled at both. In the years that followed, Vextar would serve alongside human forces in dozens of conflicts throughout the galaxy. He watched them solve impossible problems with improvised solutions and overcome hopeless odds through sheer determination. But he never forgot the lesson he learned at that remote mining station, that sometimes the most advanced technology in the universe is the willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done.